In the early morning hours of August 8, 1963, a train traveling from Glasgow to London became the target of one of the most legendary robberies in British history. It wasn't a bank, a vault, or a museum that was attacked, but a moving train carrying vast sums of cash destined for circulation across the United Kingdom. By the time the sun rose, more than £2 million had vanished, and the country was left stunned by the audacity of what would soon be known as the Great Train Robbery. At the time, the Royal Mail used passenger trains to transport cash securely overnight. This specific train, known as the Up Special, was a high-value target, carrying an enormous shipment of money collected from banks and businesses. The criminals behind the robbery knew this and spent months in meticulous preparation. They studied train schedules, security procedures, and the geography of the countryside, identifying the perfect spot where the train would need to slow down. This was not a spontaneous crime. It was a carefully engineered operation, a heist planned with military precision. The mastermind behind this audacious plan was a man named Bruce Reynolds, an antiques dealer and career criminal with a taste for the high life. He assembled a team of around 15 men, a who's who of London's underworld. Each member was a specialist, handpicked for their specific skills. There were getaway drivers, muscle, and even a retired train driver recruited to help move the train. The gang was a complex web of connections, each person playing a crucial role in the symphony of crime Reynolds was conducting. One of the most critical elements of their plan was stopping the train without raising immediate alarm. To achieve this, the robbers tampered with the railway signals. They covered the green light with a glove and used a battery to power the red light, forcing the train to halt in a remote pre-selected location known as Sears Crossing in Buckinghamshire. When the driver, Jack Mills, exited the cab to investigate the signal malfunction using the trackside telephone, he was ambushed and overpowered. He was struck over the head with an iron bar, a moment of unexpected violence that would haunt him for the rest of his life. With the crew neutralized, another gang member, who had some basic knowledge of trains, was supposed to take control of the engine. However, he struggled with the complex controls of this particular locomotive. In a moment of high-stakes improvisation, the gang forced the injured driver, Jack Mills, back into the cab to move the train further down the track to Bridego Bridge, where their getaway vehicles were waiting. There they uncoupled the high-value carriage from the rest of the train. The operation was fast but not chaotic. The robbers wore masks and gloves, used walkie-talkies for communication, and worked with disciplined coordination. Inside the high-value carriage, a few terrified postal workers were forced to lie on the floor while the gang formed a human chain, passing sack after sack of cash out to the waiting vehicles. They transferred 120 mailbags filled with banknotes, working swiftly and efficiently against the clock. In just over 30 minutes they escaped into the darkness with approximately £2.6 million. At the time, it was a staggering amount, equivalent to over £50 million or $60 million today. It was the largest cash robbery in British history. After the robbery, the gang fled to Leatherslade Farm, a remote farmhouse they had purchased as their hideout. The plan was to lie low for a few weeks, let the initial heat die down, and then divide the money before disappearing. However, this is where their meticulously planned operation began to unravel. Confined together under immense pressure, cracks started to show. They had paid a contact to clean the farmhouse after they left, but he never showed up. Growing paranoid and antsy, the gang decided to leave much earlier than planned, just a few days after the heist. Despite their earlier careful planning, they made critical, almost foolish, mistakes in their haste. They left behind fingerprints on everything from a ketchup bottle to a Monopoly board they had been playing with, using some of the stolen money as play currency. These fingerprints would become the golden ticket for the police investigation. When a local farmhand reported suspicious activity at the supposedly vacant property, police descended on Leatherslade Farm and uncovered a treasure trove of evidence. The game was up. British authorities launched a massive manhunt, one of the largest in the country's history. The robbery dominated headlines and captured the public imagination. To some, the robbers were folk heroes, cheeky anti-establishment figures who had pulled off the perfect crime. But the police were relentless. The investigation, led by Detective Chief Superintendent Jack Slipper of Scotland Yard, slowly but surely pieced together the puzzle. Using the evidence from the farmhouse, they began to identify the members of the gang one by one. The subsequent trials were a media sensation. Most of the captured gang members received extremely harsh prison sentences, some exceeding 30 years, a clear message from the justice system that such crimes would not be tolerated. However, the story didn't end there. The vast majority of the stolen money was never fully recovered. Only a fraction was ever found, with the rest disappearing forever, fueling decades of speculation about hidden stashes, secret fortunes, and lives lived out on the run. And some did run. One gang member, Ronnie Biggs, famously escaped from Wandsworth Prison in 1965. He fled abroad, eventually settling in Brazil, where he lived as a high-profile fugitive for decades, taunting the British authorities from afar. His life on the run, his celebrity status, and his eventual return to the UK in old age only added to the enduring legend of the robbery. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind, also escaped and lived abroad for 5 years before being captured and jailed. The Great Train Robbery became more than just a crime. It became a cultural phenomenon, a story embedded in the British national psyche. It inspired countless books, films, and documentaries, and it marked a turning point in how Britain viewed crime, security, and policing. Security for cash in transit was completely overhauled, and police investigative techniques were sharpened. What began as a brilliantly conceived and executed operation ultimately collapsed under the weight of human error, greed, and overconfidence. It remains one of the most talked about robberies in history, not just because of the immense sum of money involved, but because of its sheer ambition, its dramatic fallout, and its lasting impact on society. It's a crime that proves that even the most daring plans can never fully escape the long arm of consequence. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more deep dives into real events that sound like they were pulled straight from a movie script, because sometimes the most unbelievable crimes are the ones that actually happened. Thanks for watching.